Jean-Philippe Mateta, and there's no better person to break it down than Mike Lahoud, because if I remember correctly, Mike, you gave this guy a tip to make the France squad go into the World Cup, but not only that, to start in the number 9 position. This is some terrible news coming out after failing his medical.
Yeah, look, this was going to be the social media clip that was going to go viral around the world when the World Cup started, and now it's not going to happen, right? I feel for him because it's a player that is desperate to get out of a dumpster fire that is Crystal Palace right now. I mean, Palace, they are going down and down and down. The manager, who's want away, already said that he's going to be done at the end of the season. And I just thought that for a striker, there's a need of a higher profile club. Milan just seemed like the perfect fit. You look at the profile of what Milan needs. Jean-Philippe Mateta was that guy. And now it's deja vu all over again, Ian, because this is the second player that Milan have gone after that's failed his medical, and now they're left with nothing, and Mateta is left with nothing.
Yeah, be careful what you say, though, about Crystal Palace. They just spent 80 million on 2 players coming in through the door, Brennan Johnson and Strand Larsen. I think that's 2 important signings for them. Where does Mateta fit now? That's the question, right? I mean, obviously, it's very unfortunate what happened to him. It would have been a dream move. I mean, moving from Palace to Milan would have been pretty special for him, and as you pointed out there, that dreams of competing in the World Cup would have been next level. I had him also tipped to get in that World Cup squad, and I think he's a key player to what France were trying to build around. You recognise that by the most recent internationals, where he got his first goal. He was starting to really be involved. After the Olympics, it's been a good time for him. But I think the Olympics kind of hurt him. He came back to the Premier League after that, and he looked tired, didn't he, last season? Took him a while to get going. All of a sudden, he starts banging in the goals again. And then this season, it's been a bit of a stop-start. I know he's got 8 goals in the Premier League. He's got 10 goals across all comps this season, which is not a bad return. Yeah. It doesn't quite look 100%. So I was quite surprised to see Milan going for him, but I understood the reasons why. He's a presence. He's a good finisher. But when you go through these medicals, especially in Italy, I mean, they do a thorough search on your body. They'll find something that's wrong with you. I worry about the player now. I worry about his position going forward. He's not at a young age anymore, right? He's into his 30s now. So I'm really intrigued to see where he goes from there. And for Milan, that's a big opportunity missed.
Yeah, look, Jaydee, before we get going, Ian, you've been there. You've been in a January medical, right? Have you ever had an experience where it didn't go your way, where, say, you failed or they had a bit of a hesitation?
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Mike.
No.
Wow.
I didn't know it was 3. I didn't know it was 3.
Yeah, 3 medicals. I mean, I had a serious injury when I was 16 years old, my first professional game, so I minus a PCL in my knee. And didn't quite know the importance of having a PCL in your knee that was obviously working order. So I failed one at Livingston, went to the Scottish Prem when they got promoted into the Scottish Prem, failed that medical. Actually, the one that hurt me the most was in Major League Soccer. I came over very early, failed that medical because of my knee again. Only to eventually, 8 years later, get approved for that same knee. It can happen, and you never quite know. The seriousness, the expense of the contract, it can happen for multiple reasons. But I actually worry about the player. I mean, there's obviously something wrong here. And now we're hearing rumours that potentially surgery is required. Like, I hope he's okay, first and foremost, that he comes back stronger and eventually can have a good season next year.
Especially when you think about the physique of the player, him being so big. But his body is required in terms of to have those strong knees for his physicality, where he can implement himself in the game. But Ian, you brought up something that was, I think, interesting. Now we're seeing the business of football, how quickly Crystal Palace moved on, and Strand Larsen is clearly going to be a replacement in an important second half of the season for Palace.
Yeah, very interesting. Strand Larsen wasn't the same player after these rumours started to appear of him leaving the football club, right? So I understand from Wolves' point of view, they were frustrated with him individually, but he's a fantastic player. And I think, obviously, if you're looking at that battle, Mateta's at the club as well as Strand Larsen, you would say, is probably going to be the one who's going to get the nod. I have a soft spot for Mateta. I think he's a wonderful player. I think he's a very good finisher. And if you can get him consistently scoring goals, then he'll do some damage for you, like he's done for Crystal Palace in the glory days, right? And winning a trophy for the first time in forever. But Strand Larsen and Brennan Johnson's 2 very, very good signings for Crystal Palace. And obviously, it's interesting what's happening at that football club with the manager leaving in the summer. It's a very interesting time for Crystal Palace, right? Notoriously a selling club. Just spent 80 million.
Yeah, I think our thoughts naturally should be with the player, and I think you've alluded to it a lot in terms of naturally our attention is going to be on Jean-Philippe Mateta, and hope the long term is not any long-term ramifications. But I do want to focus on the other cog in this transfer, which is Milan, another failed transfer in this. They had 30 million on the table ready to go and get themselves a new number 9. Where does that leave them now with so much ambitions, especially both domestically and what else they want to do?
Yeah, look, you're going to need a bit of help in the final third right now, because we've talked about, can Rafael Leao and Christian Pulisic keep this thing going? I think that him Luka Modric and Rafa Leao, they've been keeping this Milan side. I know for how good defensively they've been. You look at the biggest thing and the biggest gap that's now starting to show itself for Max Allegri's side. They're getting draws, right? They're not clinical enough in the final third. And I just thought, should they get a healthy Jean-Philippe Mateta? You look at how they play. They get their two fullbacks high up in this 3-4-3 or 3-5-2 at different times. They lump crosses in. That is not Rafa Leao's game. That is not Christian Pulisic's game. They've been moonlighting as strikers. They're not strikers. And I just would have loved to see a Mateta in there, a physical force to be reckoned with. I think that would have opened up a bit more space underneath for Christian, when healthy, for Leao to continue to get the goods.
The biggest problem for Milan is keeping players healthy right now. Christian Pulisic ruled out for the game coming up tomorrow, which is a big miss for them. Big miss for Christian as well, by the way. Santi Jimenez, injury problem, injury prone, not healthy for Milan. Milan need a goal scorer. They bring in Nicholas Füllkrug. Is he that goal scorer? Probably not. But he's a presence and he's someone who can actually cause some damage up top there. This would have been a good one, I think, for Milan as well. Mateta coming in through the door. He's trying to get into that French squad, probably trying to get into the starting 11 for France and potentially win a World Cup, which is crazy to say. You imagine him now, that dream just shattered. But for Milan themselves, their dreams are to try and win Scudetto. They want to win a Serie A title. What did they miss? I was listening to Tony Meola on Morning Footy talking about the defence actually needing a little bit more support. And I think that's right. Tony's right. Defensively, maybe was a bit more important. But now you see, with all the injuries and Christian ruled out once again, it's not a good look for Milan right now as they go into a really busy end of the season.
I want to pick up on that point, not being a good look, because now you think about all of those injuries that have weighed up. I think about the start they had at the beginning of the season, how they came out of the blocks firing. Christian Pulisic, of course, was the spearhead of that. But now, going into the latter half of the season, are they going to have enough in terms of firepower in that final third to challenge for that Scudetto?
Yeah, look, I too had a conversation with Tony Meola, and you should have seen the look on his face when I said this team, do not sleep on the fact that as Milan are doing this in the final third, there's a team in Torino, not Torino, but the other team, Juventus, right? They're spoiled for riches in terms of attacking players right now. Yeah. Milan wish they had these sorts of options. Don't sleep on Juventus. And I know you're really high on what Spalletti and Juve are doing as well. It is not a foregone conclusion that it's Milan's second place to grab. I think it's Milan's second place to lose. I still think there's a bit of a gap between them and Inter. You look at the difference. Inter, it's the striker rotation. It's Pio Esposito and Lauti one day. It's the likes of Thuram and Janjo Boni. I mean, that is how you do it in terms of getting it done in the summer window. And I just think the Scudetto is one season too early for Milan to compete with.
Yeah, listen, Inter are running away with it right now, and understandably so. They've got a very deep squad. I know it's an ageing squad, and I understand and expect that experience is vital for them in this title race once again. Back to their best now. All of a sudden, the business end of the season has started to appear. And Napoli have struggled with injury. Now Milan struggling with injury. I mean, Roma, again, that loss is really hurting them against Udinese. So who's going to be that competitor for into the top of the table? I think right now, Michael's right. I think the battle really is for who's going to finish second. Let's talk Milan. Obviously in the headlines with this failed move for Mateta. I mean, I'd like to know a bit more details, if you have, about what actually went wrong with the Mateta deal and actually the inactivity. I would have thought they would try to have signed a defensive player today, but it didn't quite happen for them.
Yes, so AC Milan, what they've done in the transfer window, they immediately signed a striker, and I'm talking, of course, about Nicholas Füllkrug. That was the main target for the winter transfer window. That because Rafa Leao, Christian Pulisic, they have always been injured over the first part of the season, and also Santi Jimenez won't be back. So I'm not expecting him to be back soon, and that's why they needed a number 9 striker in that position. Also, as you're mentioning, yes, they needed a centre back, but also they decided to stick with the decisions they made in the summer. So Connie De Winter is the defender they decided to sign in the summer, and they decided to stick with that decision. And in the last days of the transfer window, there are always opportunities, and Mateta was one of those. He was also in talks with Juventus, but then ended up to stay at the club at Crystal Palace. So AC Milan tried to sign him actually, but after the first medical test, they decided to examine him further today in the morning. So that's why one AC Milan doctor actually flew to London to take a closer look at the situation of Mateta, and then they decided to not sign him. So probably there were some sort of, let's say, issues that couldn't be solved in the short term for Mateta. And that's why at the end they decided to stay with the current roster, and maybe not signing players was the best decision for them.
Injuries make me nervous, ruin my career some way as well. But also injuries have somewhat followed Christian Pulisic wherever he's gone. At Milan, he's been rather healthy and he's been very impactful at the football club. We're hearing ahead of the game against Bologna that Christian might be injured. He has a slight injury and he will miss that match. Any update on Christian Pulisic that you can share with us?
Yeah, that's 100% confirmed. He won't travel to Bologna for Tuesday's game, so he won't be part of the game against Bologna. I think that's a big blow for AC Milan, because we are talking about a difficult match for AC Milan. Also, we have to consider that the Rossoneri won't play during the next weekend because there is the Olympic ceremony here in Milan, actually. So San Siro will be busy for another important event, and that's why Inter could even increase the gap with AC Milan, considering they will have to face Como in the game that they were supposed to play this weekend. So the game against Bologna becomes even more important, because even if we're talking about, of course, a game they will play later, psychologically speaking, it's important for them to be as close as possible to Inter and being there.